weapon was down by your side, and it was all very, it was all very calm. And then basically, so we finished that tour knowing that, okay, that was a bit strange around there, because there was more, we could tell that we were being watched more, there was more cars seeing us and speeding off, and a different atmosphere. And then we left, we went home, and it was the 16th Air Assault Brigade that had taken over from us, then obviously started the proper war fighting phase against the Taliban then in Helmand province. And we were like, this is ridiculous. We were just there. We thought, this is amazing, because we had just been in that same place. But obviously it was before the proper sort of offensive had started, where they actually wanted to, really try and dislodge the Taliban from Helmand province. And so that was strange that we'd just been there. And so I just went, it was then later on, so this was 2006, early 2006, I think it was. Then towards the end of 2006, I volunteered to go back on a short tour for a month and a half, because they were looking for javelin operators. So I was in anti-tank platoon, so I was javelin missile basically trained. I went back for a month and a half to a completely different place, a completely different experience. We flew into a oh god, what's it called? Sangin. So Sangin is a small place in Helmand province, where we basically flew in there, and I was just met with a scene that was entirely different from the one that we'd left, where it was, people were living in really austere conditions. They were living off rations. This was a winter tour as well, so they were pale. They had beards. They were skinny. They were, looked like they'd really been through a lot. And I sort of, me and my colleagues sort of arrived just like fresh from the UK. Like, what is going on? These guys had really been through, a long time living in really austere kind of conditions. I remember we did like we do like a listening watch after. So basically, after we'd been on sentry duty, we had to just take a moment to listen to the ground, to listen for any signs of tunnelling, because there was a threat that the Taliban would actually try and tunnel up underneath us and come in through the patrol base, which is a terrifying thought. Imagine someone appearing in the ground. It never happened, but we had to do that, go through that drill of listening to the ground at the end of every sentry duty, just to sort of see if we could hear anything. So that was obviously a completely different world from the one that I'd left before, which actually seemed quite, again, it seemed quite sort of stable and peaceful initially, and then it was that, once they started that kind of phase of real sort of, war fighting phase, if you like, it completely changed. So yeah, I did quite a short period of time there, because it was, I was just basically put into make up numbers for a while, and then we went back as a whole battalion for Op Herrick 9, and that was my first sort of full 6-month tour, where it was actually a proper kind of a tour where there was a lot going on, and it was a full 6 months, so that was it was, I think, I'm trying to think what dates that was roughly, but we were kind of 2008, 2009, I think, roughly. So it was, but it was another winter tour. I think one of the things that people might find surprising is how that it was sticky, kind of like sticky mud a lot of the time in the middle of winter. It wasn't like people imagine Afghanistan as being like this hot desert all the time, and it was horrifically hot in the summer, but the middle of winter really was kind of wet, not that cold, but like just everything was just constantly muddy, and so you're kind of like this you see it on memes where people sort of say experiences may vary about Afghanistan. You know, the real kind of like some of the places that I, you know, had to sort of live in, like on Herrick 9, we had an observation post, which basically a hill where we were using to observe, you know, basically keep a sort of watch in the area, and we'd sort of do about 2 days on, 2 days off on that. So when we were up on that hill, we were basically effectively like living in a hole, pretty much. Like it was kind of a dugout sort of thing that you'd expect to see from World War One. You know, we were just kind of, it was just really kind of basic conditions, you know, that you'd imagine, you know, and there's so many people that kind of, I know, lived in more built up bases in Afghanistan that I sort of, you know, there's always an element of kind of like rivalry, like wanting to tell people, like I wasn't living in Camp Bastion where I had my laundry done for me, you know. We were hand washing, we were eating rations, everything was muddy. It was, you know, it really was, you know, I think there's definitely a lot of rivalry that exists between, you know, people that kind of had the proper experience and those who didn't. But yeah, so during that tour we would do about 2 days on there, and then 2 days roughly where we'd be on the Wimics, so on the big sort of Land Rover things, driving around and basically patrolling in support of the guys that were on foot. And that's where I kind of had the first experiences of, you know, firing, you know, a machine gun at, you know, at living human beings, I suppose, which is a, you know, horrific kind of thing to say, but it's like it's a bizarre, yeah, it's a bizarre thing to think, you know, that, you know, so many of us have done that and just sort of then go on to live normal lives. It's really, it's a really strange idea. But that was, so the first sort of major contact I had was with, we were driving along a sort of a narrow path with a sort of cornfield on one side and just a wall on the other, and we kind of came out into this open area. There was a massive sort of open field, and about 400 meters away there were some trees, and you could just see some sort of little dots really at that distance. It's, you know, barely, that people are just sort of dots sort of running along, and we were like, what's that? That's a bit strange, like who's that running? And then you suddenly hear this, you know, huge cracking noise around you. Obviously they're firing, and then it is just like an exercise. You just start, you know, you fire back, and you can't really see what you're firing at properly, because you just, like I say, over that distance, it's just, you know, they're just sort of little dots. But then, and you can't really see what effect you're having. But you know, you just, I remember this the sergeant sort of just sort of coming over to the side of Land Rover and putting his hand on my shoulder and going, yeah, that's good, like as in that's accurate fire, you know, because he could see maybe a little bit more clearly than I could. So yeah, that was the first sort of experience of that. And then afterwards, like I say, that you feel like that actually, a kind of sense of relief that actually something's happened, because I think that people dread the idea when someone's in the army and they've gone through all that training and all that preparation, you know, and all that pre-deployment training. The thing that I think most soldiers dread the most is the idea that that something will go, that you know, they won't be able to perform their sort of function in reality. You know, they'll be shot at, and for whatever reason